So hi everyone and welcome to this session today in the Tackling Loneliness Hub. We have today Laura Marciano, and she will shortly introduce herself on this wonderful topic of the influence of social media on young people. So please, Laura, I give the floor to you. And if we can save the questions for after the end of the presentation, that would be lovely. I will be monitoring with Abba the chat if you have anything in the meantime. So thank you.
Thank you, Antonia, for this introduction. I will just share my screen so I can start the presentation. Hopefully you can see my screen now. Yes, okay. So good afternoon, because here it's morning, everyone. I'm Laura Marciano. I am a research associate at the Harvard T.H. School of Public Health. My background is in psychology and cognitive neuroscience, originally from Italy. I completed my PhD in health communication in Switzerland, and I spent 2 years as a postdoctoral research fellow here at Harvard, and now research associate and PI on some projects that have been funded by the Swiss National Science Foundation and the NIH recently. And I also recently started a collaboration with Boston Children's as well and Digital Wellness Lab. So this is just to give you a little bit of my background when it came to me to study this topic of today, that is social media and adolescent well-being, connections, challenges, and digital media. So I would like to give you a brief overview of the agenda that I thought for us. I would like to start from defining loneliness. I'm sure that the majority of you knows how to define that, but I just wanted to go back to some definitions that in my experiences, my journey, I found very useful. And then we will talk about loneliness and its relationship to health, especially adolescent health, and then to social media. I will present some results of the Happy Bee studies in terms of theories and also methodology of studying this topic right now today. And then we will finish with digital detox. And I would really like to hear your opinion regarding this topic and a Q&A session. Although, as I was talking with Eva yesterday, we are also happy to have questions in the chat. And I will stop like before changing the topic, just to check if there is any relevant question that is important to answer right now. So let's start with this. Let's start with the definition. And actually, I'm starting with a question for you, and I would like to take your phone out and scan the QR code on the left and tell me if, in your opinion, this person is lonely, is isolated. Sorry, the first question is if this person is lonely. If you scan the QR code, I will change my... Okay, I'm not sure. I'll keep the QR code here. Sorry if I have to change my screens. I can see a lot of, I'm not sure, no. I will wait a few. Okay, I don't know, I'm not sure. I have 7 answers so far. Okay, so I will stop here. So the majority of you say I am not sure, and some of you know, which makes sense because actually, I mean, we can just see that this person is just by himself, but like is not sure what is going on here. What about if I ask you if this person is isolated though? If I will change the slide, you should be able to vote for the second question. Let me know if that works correctly. I cannot see your vote yet.
Sorry, can you go back to the QR code for a
Yes,
moment?
here it is. Because I think it's supposed to go ahead automatically, but okay, now I can see we still have some unsure, no, yes. More yes. Kind of balanced between the three. I think we have 6 before, we had 7. There is still one person that might need to vote. Okay, by the way, I will go ahead. So as you can see, yeah, it's like we still have some kind of confusion, isolated. Yeah, while we can say this person is kind of objectively isolated because there is only that person, but we don't know what's going on and at the subjective level. And the first key message that we need to remember is that loneliness is 100% subjective. 100% subjective. I can feel lonely even among a group of people, but social isolation is objective. And this is a very key important definition to consider. And I use that example because I think from a presentation of Jeremy Nobel that I will introduce in a moment, it really sticks in my head, that image and the difference between loneliness and social isolation. So I think that is kind of a powerful way to present the difference. So loneliness is the experience when there is a gap between the quantity or the quality of actual and desired social relationships, and it differs from other constructs like being alone, solitude, and social isolation. So the focus here is really on the gap that we feel between what we would like to have and what we actually have. And one of the best definitions that I found indeed is from the book of Jeremy Nobel, who is a faculty here at the Harvard Medical School. He elaborated this project that is called Project Unlonely. You might have heard about that because it's focused on arts and cultural activities. And I know that in UK, the use of arts also as a social prescribing is something that is and at an advanced level with respect to like other countries. But yeah, he defined loneliness as a natural biological signal like hunger or thirst. And he's a flashing warning light in our mental dashboards that indicates a problem. So loneliness is like biologically founded in our system. And also, as John Cacioppo, another great scholar that studied loneliness, loneliness is just as physical pain is an aversive signal that evolved to motivate our behavior. Loneliness is also an aversive state is a distressing feelings that motivates us to take action to minimize the damage to our social body and social well-being. So loneliness is really like rooted in our biology as a biological signal that is telling us that something is missing, and so that motivates us to change our behavior. And here I want to report some key information published by the US Surgeon General report on loneliness. And just to remember, from loneliness from one side, we also have like social connection from the other side. And there are some vital components of social connection that we need to consider when we study that in our society. There is the structure component related to the variety of relationships and also the frequency of interactions, the functional component related to the degree to which relationships serve various needs, and then the quality component that is related to having positive, helpful, and satisfying relationships. And each of these components can rely on different examples on everyday lives. So social connections can be measured on a continuum, and feeling lonely or socially connected to others can be a transient feeling, but it becomes problematic when loneliness and social isolation are experienced chronically. Also, and especially because each one of these components is related to health at different levels. So the biological level, psychological level, and behavioral level. And all these three levels are interrelated. So from a biological perspective, for example, we know that loneliness is related to stress hormones like cortisol and inflammation. For example, the feeling of loneliness and isolation has the same biological effects or even more on inflammation as physical inactivity. And we also know that inflammation is a risk factor for chronic illnesses in general. Biologically also, we know that loneliness and social connections can have an effect even on our gene expression and gut microbiome. Then from a psychological perspective that is also related to the behavioral perspective, the fact of feeling lonely can lead to less self-regulated behaviors, and so to less behaviors that should improve our health. So a lower engagement in health promoting behaviors like physical activity, sleep, food, nutrition, while other behaviors like smoking or even using like drugs are preferred. And the fact that we tend to self-regulate as less is also related to the fact that when someone is feeling lonely, basically it becomes more vigilant respect to the environment, because the environment is perceived as more threatening. And so it's also more difficult for us to regulate our behavior. And this is why, like, when it comes to loneliness and health, I don't know if you're familiar with this meta-analysis from Professor Holt Lundstedt. So she studied all the all-cause mortalities and the connection to the lack of social connection. And in the end, as you can see from here, from the graphs, loneliness and the lack of social connection were related to all-cause mortalities more than smoking up to 15 cigarettes per day, more than drinking 6 alcoholic drinks a day, more than physical inactivity, obesity, and air pollution. And that is something definitely that we need to consider very carefully when we think about what is at the public health level, the effects that loneliness can have in terms of increased morbidity and mortality in the population, and also accelerating aging, for example. One interesting fact is that among all the diseases for cardiovascular disease, there has been found a dose-response relationship. And also, although some psychological diseases, they're not maybe specifically included in this meta-analysis, because that was focused more on reports studying all-cause mortalities, there has been like an important link also with emotional and cognitive processes, and even neurodegenerative diseases that we need to consider. When it comes to loneliness as a stress factor for our brain and body in adolescence, we need to consider different elements. As I said before, the feeling of loneliness is related to being more hypervigilant and feeling the context as unsafe. So when we become hypervigilant for social threats, we also tend to have a cognitive bias, and we tend to see the world with negative lenses, and also to have a negative social expectations that ultimately leads to a self-fulfilling processes that want confirms a lonely pattern. And so this kind of cognitive bias going from loneliness to anxiety to having this kind of biases when it comes to the social world can have long-lasting consequences. And for example, we know that adolescent loneliness is a risk factor on the long term for mental health problems, psychiatric symptoms, and poor health. In adolescence, poor social relationships show comparable effects to physical inactivity on inflammation risk. So it's not only in adults, but also at this age. And the stress response that can be generated during adolescence can persist later in life. Indeed, according to a study, they found that adolescent social connections differentiate health risks in young adults long before the symptoms or signs of disease can emerge. So it's really something that can have long-lasting consequences and play a role in a pre-disease pattern into adulthood. For example, according to one of the studies cited here, adolescent social integration matters for young adult metabolic and cardiovascular healthy functioning later on. So this is definitely one important thing to consider when we study this topic. At the same time, we also need to remember that during adolescence, the social context shifts from family to peer relationships, and the adolescent brain reacts differently to social interactions than the brain of children and adults, and we will see that later on. And so the quality of social relationships at that age critically depends on the connections with peers and friends, because teens, they start to go outside the family sphere and explore the environment more. So peers and friends, they really become the most important context when it comes to social relationships at that age. Maybe if you have any questions on this part, just feel free to put that into the chat. Because right now I'm moving on. Okay, what is the role of social media and digital technologies? Okay. I don't see questions, so I will move on. So what is the role of digital technologies today? Is a highly debated topic, extremely debated. I want to make an acknowledgement. All my research has been based on the adolescent age in Switzerland and in the United States. In both countries, there is a ban in elementary schools, middle schools. We are questioning about high schools because it's a different period. Usually I don't take like a clear position, but what I can just say is that when it comes to elementary schools and middle schools, fine. When it comes to high schools, since the debate in UK is also, should we ban smartphones below 16 years of age or not? And I mean, between 14 and 16 years of age is kind of a very, very tricky to find a good answer. What I can only say is that before that age, I mean, in elementary and middle school, smartphones are not they're not useful for any outcome in the schools. And even during the high school, right now we have smartphones holders in the majority of high schools in Boston. I think that is a great solution because, I mean, what is the purpose of using the phone in classrooms? You can use the phone during the break or lunch break to reconnect with family and peers, but there is no really other, I mean, useful thing that you can do. But at the same time, it's important to not demonize or treat smartphone usage as a taboo in high school, I think. But what I've been doing in Switzerland is to work a lot with schools and teachers in order to develop workshops and maybe some kind of curricula that can talk about how to use smartphones and social media in a healthier way during high school. So I acknowledge it's a quite debated topic, and I just wanted to let you know from what I'm coming from. So I'm not really a pro of banning completely things. I have more a balanced view, but I agree with the fact that in high school we should have like smartphone holders and just keep the attention focused on the topic of the lessons meantime. And why is important to study this topic at this age? Well, we kind of know that, but I just wanted to report here some key facts. If you think about that on average today, a person is receiving a smartphone at 10 years of age. And at that age, then you will likely spend almost 10 years of your life on a phone. So it's definitely very important to study how we are spending our time and attention. And also, according to some studies, we tend to reach our phones every 5 minutes to start an interaction. So it's like a decision that is coming from us rather than from a notification. At the same time, there has been quite a lot of studies that were showing a trend in terms of rating of levels of depression, anxiety, and loneliness after the use of some social media platforms. And then adolescence is an age of increased vulnerability. So these are definitely 3 things that we need to consider. At the same time, although we know that the topic is important, the ongoing conversation is also very, very articulated right now. We hosted 2 workshops, one at Harvard and one in Switzerland, with also some representatives from UK, like Dr. Amy Orben. She's a colleague and a collaborator, also very active, extremely active on this topic, and amazing researcher. These are some of the key points that we agreed after the 2 workshops. The first is that results are mixed. So we have a lot in terms of positive and negative and null relationships between especially social media usage and well-being. Each user have a unique experience on social media platforms because the algorithm consider the preference of everyone. So it's very difficult to compare the experience on social media among different people. And a lot of effects and associations are still under study, with definitely less studies on positive effects that social media can have. The relationship is complex due to individual, social, and contextual factors, and we will talk about that in a bit. And also, we always need to consider that behavior goes beyond the use of social media, and that should be seen in the context of a person's life. Also, one very important key point is that today, time spent on social media is an insufficient predictor of health and well-being, although the majority of the scientific literature is based on measures of screen time. And also that platforms change rapidly, and our measures so far, they might not be able to catch all the variabilities of the platforms. So also from us, we need to be a bit more flexible and fast. So when it comes to teen loneliness and social media usage, there have been two trends. So from one side, the increase in adolescent loneliness between 2012 to 2018, a further increase after COVID, and now about half of US teens report feeling lonely. At the same time, also teens tend to spend twice the time in 2022 compared to 2014-15 on social media, and even more like year by year, they tend to spend more time with preferences for platforms like YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat. So because these two trends have been described, some studies show, using very, very large population, and data collected over a lot of years. Some studies show that, for example, as you can see in the graph on the left, there has been a decrease in in-person social interaction involving different activities that are related to leaving homes, like less time with friends, getting together, socializing, going to parties, going out, dating, going to movies. But at the same time, we had an increase in internet usage, social media usage, and loneliness. And that has been quite consistent across different cohorts, as you can see in the graph on the right. Although one important factor is that the decline that we see in in-person social interaction has been described at the cohort level, which means that some time for in-person social interaction has been displaced because of the use of digital technologies at the cohort level, at the between-person level, what we call. While at the individual level, so if we go and look the individuals according to the previous time spent on some kind of activities, at the individual level, we see that more time spent on the screen and social media correlates with more time spent with friends. So in this case, there is a kind of complementarity. And I will show you that this result is coming back a lot of the times, so that at the cohort level, we see that there is less time in in-person social interaction, but then at the individual level, if you use technologies more, you are also going to spend more time with others. And so sometimes it's difficult to put together these two results. But there is also like a statistical reason and different reasons. And this is also why today we have very heterogeneous results. One of the key points to consider on how social media changed social interactions during adolescence is that the way to communicate, and especially some social media features, can really alter the quality of friendships. For example, think about asynchronicity or being always available for others, so being always available to reach others, the permanence of messages and content, the absence of visual cues of emotional reactions when someone is not in front of us, the fact that a lot of content might be public in the end, the fact that we quantify messages, but also likes, followers, and everything that we have is very visually based with the use of images and videos. All of that, to a certain extent, can change the peer relationships in a negative and positive way. So, for example, from one side, we have an more frequent and immediate experience. From the other side, we can have an altered quality of the experience. I have to say this model is very complex, and I'm happy to share the slides with you because I think it would be great if you are interested to take a look at that. And a lot of my research so far has been based on this model of transformation of social relationships and peer relationships during adolescence. And I think that is the most comprehensive model that we have so far in order to understand how things are changing. But we still have to measure all these media features and what is the effects of these media features on loneliness and well-being. And this is what I'm trying to do with my latest projects, actually. So here, I also wanted to show you a bit more why it's important to consider how the teen brain works at that age. Because when it comes to teen brain and social world, the teenage brain tend to react to the social information in a way that is different from the adult brain and the brain of children. So here I just want to report one of my favorite neuroscientific experiments. So participants, they were in a functional magnetic resonance, and a researcher was telling them a peer is looking at you. So there is no judgment here. They were also matched for gender. There is no judgment, no positive, no negative, just someone is looking at you. But look at the level of embarrassment, self-reported embarrassment, and the age. You can see that there is a peak around adolescence. Because teenagers, they tend to process the social information in a way that is different. They're more susceptible to this kind of information. And at the same time, the functional magnetic resonance results, they show the corresponding nonlinear recruitment of socio-affective brain circuitry, like the medial prefrontal cortex. That is an important area to integrate emotional and social information, which means, so the more we recruit these areas, the more we give salience and emotional arousal and self-relevance to specific social stimuli and social situations. And that is also related to mentalizing processing and, for example, the theory of mind. So just from that, you can start realizing why it's so important at that age to consider how the social sphere can influence teen well-being. At the same time, sorry, I just wanted to, okay, exit from the presentation. Because I have the references on the bottom of the slide. Can you see the references? Yes. Okay, no?
Sorry, not at the bottom of the slide.
Yeah, that
It's
was,
not visible at the moment, but I don't know. Yeah, now when we receive them, we will be able to.
yeah. Or otherwise I can show my slides like that, because also for the model is the model from NASI. And I think it's also important. Maybe some of you already noticed these papers before.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, there is no references here. Okay. Then that is another very nice article that wanted to basically look at loneliness across times and spaces. I think like one of the key points also to show you why it's so complicated to study this topic today is that like the use of social media can be seen as a macro level factor that can impact loneliness through different indirect pathways. And the total effect is the product of two indirect pathways. So for example, social media can augment the frequency of social interactions and in the end diminish loneliness. So from one side, we will think that it will diminish loneliness because the product is a negative like relationship, but at the same time, social media usage can displace time for online interactions, which is related to higher level of loneliness. So that will mean a positive relationship between social media usage and loneliness. And so again, this is another example to show you why the picture is so complicated today and why we are finding heterogeneous results. At the same time, when we look at different populations, we know, and I'm telling you why it's important to study this topic during adolescence, but at the same time, there might be more positive effects in mid-age adults and older adults, although the majority of the literature so far is still based on media like television. So we don't know that much about the role of social media and instant messaging communication, for example, in older adults, because there might be a very important opportunity there. Another important key factor is that effects are weak, but have been described as small and weak, but they can accumulate throughout the time. And so this is why we can see that some trends change, and it takes a lot of time to see the consequences of that. If we think about COVID, we are still seeing the consequences on younger generations today. And just to give you a bit more of like complexity, maybe before going here, I just wanted to ask you if there is any question so far. Okay. So to add a little more of complexity, there are different theoretical models that we can consider, and I consider in my research as well. So for example, in this paper, we were looking at depression, social connection, and internet usage. And we tried to test two competitive theoretical models. Oh, I see one question. Spending more time on social media results in more time with friends. Yes, that is a very interesting question. There are different theories, and actually one is like these two. There are two theories that we can use, and I will show that we found the same results even in our data, the same results that I just showed you from millions of teenagers. And yeah, regarding there are differences among different social media platforms, that is also another good point, because sadly, the majority of the literature so far is still looking at internet, time on the internet, time on social media, even this paper that we published a few years ago, general social media usage, Facebook usage, and very few papers are actually on Instagram, Snapchat, or differentiating different social media platforms, because science is coming late on this topic. Some platforms are changed rapidly. So this is also why during our workshops, we were thinking to create like an index of some features that we should always look at, even if the name of the platform changed from one day to another, even if a platform is banned from one country. Think about TikTok or Twitter and X. So these are all examples that are happening in real life, and we definitely need to adapt our measures also to face possible social political changes of that kind. But when it comes to theories, maybe here we can understand a bit better why there might be different views. So according to the Internet Enhanced Self-Disclosure hypothesis, using social media and internet-based communication is a way to enrich our communication and to augment self-disclosure that is important for friendship formation and maintenance. And it also increases the frequency and quality of relationships and social capital. And teens socially poor and rich will get rich in any way, just because social media can be seen as an extended space for socialization, where offline connections are maintained and further developed. And also on the internet, we can compensate for the lack of offline social connections, but also for social insecurity and social anxieties that we might have. So overall, that would increase well-being. That is one theory. From the other perspective, the evolutionary mismatch model say that basically the advent of social media and technology is reversing what ancestrally was an adaptive behavior into a maladaptive one. So, for example, crucial processes that promote intimacy, security, trust, and cooperation, they have been altered by online communication. And so this is why today there is a mismatch between what was ancestrally supposed to be and what we are doing right now. And so according to this model, the disclosure is very superficial and is followed by a superficial response, limiting the possibility to really understand and validate each other, because online communication cannot be compared to face-to-face communication. And so in that way, we are losing the ancestral meaning related to our social connections. And I have to say, there is quite some truth in that. And we also know that from neuroscientific studies that have shown that receiving support through the hand of a friend and receiving support to a text message has a completely different brain activation, because receiving support through someone that is there for you and is just holding your hand is definitely more powerful and effective than receiving support throughout a text. So we know that there is some kind of truth in that, and I've seen also in my data. At the same time, online communication might displace or make the interaction poorer, because it's not only about displacing time for in-person interaction, but also interfering with basic cognitive processes like the lack of proper responsiveness and low empathy. Just because we are not in front of the other person, we cannot see the face, we cannot see the emotional expression unless we do video calls. And actually, like, for example, video calls, but also calls, I've seen in my data they have been related to higher levels of well-being than texting. This is why, I mean, these two models can be seen like in contradiction with each other. And we try to understand, okay, how we can do to test it. And we have done that with a cohort followed over 4 years. And this is a very complicated model. It's called a random intercept cross-legged panel model, which is quite used today to disentangle what we call between and within person effect. I will just walk you throughout the results. Just make sure when I talk about between person effects, it means the effects at the cohort level. So across the participants, across everyone, there are some people that use the internet more or less, that are more or less depressed, or they have more or less social connection. When we talk about within person effect, I'm talking about my personal level respect to my previous level. So how being, I don't know, be above or below my average can predict later on if I feel better or not, if I use internet or not. But my average can be at the low or high level respect to the cohort. So I can be someone at a very high level, but what is the dynamic inside my person can be different respect to my position at the cohort level. So in this study, we wanted to focus on depressive levels, social connections in terms of spending time with friends and internet usage. What we found is that, as you can see at the within person level, throughout the 4 years, each variable tended to increase. So depression levels increase, social connections and internet usage increased as well. This is not surprising because at time when teens, they were 11 years old. So that is part of the development. However, at the within person level, we also found that higher internet usage increased depressive levels over time, but with an effect that, if you see, is quite small. It's 0.05 at time 1, then 0.07 at time 2 and 3 is a very, very small effect. At the same time, we also partially found the opposite, that higher depressive levels also increase internet usage over time. And so for that, we can see like kind of a compensatory behavior. So people that are already experiencing mental health problems, they might tend to use the online world as a way to compensate for their problems. However, we didn't see any mediation of time spent with peers at the within person level. But at the between person level, so at the cohort level, in the same way as in the study that I showed you with millions of teenagers, teens that tended to spend more time online, they also tended to spend more time with friends. So there is some kind of complementarity there as well. At the same time, one important thing that we have done in this paper was controlling for covariates, including gender, quality of family relationships, device ownership, and social desirability. What we found is that all these covariates, they could predict the initial levels of internet usage, social connection, and depression. Specifically, being female was related and possessing internet-enabled mobile devices. They were related to higher depressive symptoms at time 1, and also more time while having good relationships. It was a protective factor against depression and less time on the internet. And device ownership at time 1 increased both depression and internet, was related to higher depression and internet usage, but also to more time with friends again. So sometimes we see these effects that are different at the cohort level, at the within person level. For sure, what we see at the within person level, which is the level that is more important for us when it comes to like cause effects mechanism, is very small. So the effect is really very, very small. If we think about how much variance we can explain with that effect, is really almost negligible. And that is why the scientific literature and the debate is so complicated today, because these are the kind of effects that we can find. Any questions on this part?
Yes, we've got a question from Nick Hernandez, who asked, what factors in the model add to relationship quality?
Was about this model or a previous model?
Nick, would you be able to put that in the chat for us? So I think he's just typing. Back.
Some factors that I can talk about, for example, during COVID, I authored a systematic review on the use of social media during COVID and in adolescence. We found that video calls, they were a way to protect well-being and social connections, especially when measures of life satisfaction, they were like going down. So there are certain features that obviously used in a proper way, like video calling, or even the synchronicity of text messages and online communication. They have positive effects, like also the exchange of content, images. Yeah, Antonia, you have a question.
I just wanted to ask you, Laura, because I've been kind of reading quite widely about, and I can see your findings for within and between person levels. There's been a recent systematic review talking about active and passive use of social media. Mm-hmm. So I wonder whether that kind of plays a role, because it was my understanding at that point when I was reading that passive use refers to obviously kind of just observing what's happening online. And with my kind of psychology hat on and looking at my own research, it sort of reflected the way that young people view other people's life as more important or happier compared to their own, and kind of making that comparison when you're like in a passive state, because you see, all of these success stories kind of happening online, and that could potentially mediate that relationship with depression. While when the engagement with social media was more active, like you mentioned here, like the between, so different groups of people, that facilitated social connections with friends offline as well. So I wondered what your opinion was on that.
Oh yeah, I will be talking about that in a few, actually, because there has been a lot on active passive, and now we call that even outdated, because active is also passive and it's kind of a mixed thing. Mm-hmm. But absolutely, like for a certain period, that is like active is good, passive is bad for different reasons. And I'm even going further. Like for me, the psychological processes involved, they are the key. Indeed, maybe I will like move on, and I think we can find like some answer also to the questions that we got. So what are the missing points, even of the paper that I presented you? not measuring the quality of social relationships in a proper way. They focus on ill-being factors, so like depression, anxiety, and so there is kind of a very huge bias in the literature because the majority of the studies have been focused on that. Missing biological correlates for well-being, that is still like a very open question, and I think also that is the future. And more importantly, the way we measure social media usage and use of technologies have been relied on self-reporting information, and statistically, self-reported information, they are inherently higher correlated because of the nature of the measure. So if you bring self-reported smartphone usage and self-reported well-being, they will be higher correlated than objective smartphone usage and self-reported well-being. This is something that I found consistently in my studies. So if you think about here with self-reported information, we already have a small effects. When you think about traced information or more intense data about the time of usage, the effects is even smaller or null. So this is why the complexity is even greater today. So with these two studies, and I will just go a little bit in the methodology, and I think I might run out of time, but just let me know when there is no time left. I'm happy to say a little more to chat because I just realized my presentation is a little bit longer. But with these two studies, I've tried to move behind these limitations. And when we think about a Happy Bee study, for example, today, I would say in general, one of the more advanced way to study this topic is to have longitudinal and intensive longitudinal data. So where you have a cohort of people, but then you also have maybe a sub-cohort, which in this case is study 2, where the information is collected intensively with smartphones. So usually we use an application that was called Etica before, now Avicenna. You can send ecological momentary assessments, which are brief surveys carried out throughout the day, but also collect trace data and screenshots. And in that way, we can follow teens' well-being and social media usage throughout the day. Just to show you what is the what I'm doing with the Happy Bee 2.0, for which the data collection is still ongoing. In Etica, usually you can have a baseline survey where you ask certain questions like gender, socioeconomic status, loneliness, well-being, ill-being, resilience, social media usage. And then in the field study that can last from 2 weeks to 1 month, you can have EMAs, ecological momentary assessments, asking very brief questions about the type of interactions that you had in the hour before, loneliness, positive, negative affect, and the quality of the interaction. At the same time, at the daily level, we also collect trace data in terms of screen time and battery status and screenshots of social media usage. And then we hope to have a follow-up assessment. This part, the screenshots part, has been very crucial in my work recently because iOS smartphones, they didn't allow, I think before recently, but it's still something that we need to explore. The smartphones with an iOS system, Apple didn't allow to track social media usage, app usages, but only screen time, while you can track that with Android phones. So for us, the only way to have that kind of information was to ask participants to go into your settings and send us the screenshots of your time spent, number of notifications, number of pickups, and then elaborate a sophisticated way with experts in computer science. So multidisciplinary approach is key here to extrapolate this information for different languages, formats, and so on. And then the focus is on also positive well-being indicators that I can show you here, like hedonic well-being, eudaimonic well-being, because that is something that is lacking today in the literature, together with constructs like flourishing and thriving that can tackle on more information about that. Yeah, so let's go to maybe the most important thing that we can have as a takeaway. I will just go up to the end of the presentation, is the quality of the relationship. And
Laura, can I just ask you, because I think some people might need to go at 3.
Yeah.
Would you be able to kind of summarize slowly, and then we can have the slides made available?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry that I was taking longer than supposed to. So basically what we found is that it's not the time, but it's the quality of the online social relationships that is key for the well-being, respect to anything else. And this is where we need to focus, and also where we need to create more awareness regarding what brings quality or less quality in the digital environment. So as I say, doing calls and video calls, or looking at the features that can promote the quality is a very important step to take, but also using the digital space in a way that can enhance already existing relationships, because relying on that excessively or chronically can impact long-term well-being and social skill necessary to create a safe and healthy connections. And also using social media in an authentic way. In a meta-analysis that we recently published, we found the effects of social comparison, as you, Antonia, were saying. So social comparison to me is really the plug of social media, because that is the larger effects, even larger than problematic social media usage that we found on well-being. At the same time, in that meta-analysis, you can see how the effects becomes larger when you look at the quality and specific social interactions rather than screen time and passive and active social media usage. So yeah, I also had something related to digital detox, but I can just leave you the slide. And if you have any questions, you can just follow up on that.
And I think it might be good, Laura, to if you can share your email in the chat, it would be nice to catch up after. Oh yeah, it's in the last one. Thank you. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
So when you talk, because we kind of touched upon the passive versus active, you kind of went further and thought like using social media as the medium or as a facilitator for connecting with others is more beneficial, and that's kind of linked with less loneliness compared to being passively kind of hiding behind the digital screen and observing the lives of others, where you get like that social comparison aspect as well.
Yeah, maybe I can just show you this. This is the result of the meta-analysis.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, here we have on the x-axis the level of correlation between 0, +1, -1, and here on the y, the amount of evidence.
Yeah.
The correlation between well-being, social media time, passive usage is like 0 and not significant, because they are too general. Like also, even when it's passive, we really don't know what is the content that teens are exposed to. But when we look at active, using social media as a way to communicate intensity, positive experiences, the amount of evidence is less, but the strength of the relationship is larger. At the same time, in the negative way, and here social comparison is very, very negative. So the point is that we need to look at the nuances of the social behavior online to really understand what is good or not good for happiness and well-being, and the time itself is not enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that. That's really, really great. And I'll email you later on to have a further conversation after I've seen your review. Thank you very much. And thank you for everyone that's joined today. We'll make the video available and your slides, Laura, within the Tackling Loneliness Hub, and I'm sure people are really eager to watch this later on.
They are.
I think, Abba, do you have anything to say before we close?
Oh, no, that's it. Just thank you for attending. And the webinar and slides, like Antonia said, will be available on the Hub and our YouTube channel.
Thank you very much, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.